Introduce to you all of our guests who are going to give us just a little insight. Not a lot. We cannot say much. Just a little insight on what's coming up this next Saturday. First, I'd like to introduce to you Craig Borsari, Chief Content Officer and Executive Producer at UFC. Craig, welcome.
Thank you.
Now we have Chris Kartzmark, Senior Vice President of Production and Programming at UFC. Welcome.
Pleasure to be here.
Let's welcome all of our guests. Heidi Noland, Senior Vice President of Global Brand and Creative at UFC. Welcome. Let's give it up. We also have Carlos López Estrada, Academy Award nominee and segments director for the film at this event. We will get into that in just a moment. Carlos, bienvenido. Welcome.
Gracias.
And last but not least, we have 7-time Emmy Award winner Marina Toybina, who's a world-renowned costumer and stylist, custom designer for this event. Marina, welcome. Let's give it up for our guests. All right. Craig, let me start with you. Once Dana told you about this idea, when he told you he wanted to do an event at the Sphere, first of all, I want to know your first reaction, initial reaction, and then just walk us through some of the hurdles that you guys had to get over to make this happen.
Sure. Yeah. The first reaction was intrigue. You know, it was an interesting idea, one that's out of the box for sure. But you know, that's a bit of the way Dana is built, and it's a bit of the ethos of this company is to try to push the envelope and do things that haven't been done before. So wasn't surprised about the request to go check out the U2 concert to see how we would pull this off. When I got there, the stress levels definitely started to increase, and I thought this is not as simple as us going into a traditional venue, any venue we've been in the last 20 years, to put on a fight. And there were a lot of challenges that were presented to us that night while we were watching the concert. The first one, for sure, was the issue of lighting. If we couldn't figure out how we were going to engineer our lighting inside such a unique venue, we were stuck, because for 30 years we have put on fights around the world in a variety of different venues, and we put a lighting truss up 32 feet above the floor over our octagon for every show that I've been a part of in my 20-year career here at the UFC. So and obviously doing that at the Sphere with an incredible media plane behind the lighting truss is just not something that was feasible. And why would you even go into Sphere Las Vegas if you have this visual obstruction in front of the display plane? So we went through months, at that point, we went through a few months of just trying to figure out, well, what is the solution? Should we go with ground support lighting? Should we look at lighting that maybe, was on motors that would come up and down? And ultimately, the engineering team came up with a really ingenious idea of lighting our octagon from behind the display plane. So the LED screen in Sphere Las Vegas has little gaps in between the LED nodes, and those gaps allow us to blow light from behind the LED media plane through the LED and light up the octagon. So we went through a variety of different CAD drawings and diagrams to figure out what angles we need to be fixing our lighting truss to allow us not to have any shadowing inside the octagon, but a lengthy process to figure out lighting. Once we figured that out, we knew that we could achieve a show at that point, and then the other challenges started.
At any point did you go, this is just not going to work? This just can't happen?
No, because at the UFC we just don't say no. We really don't. There is always a way. Mm-hmm. We just couldn't. It was hard to figure out what that way was going to be. Yeah. But no, we just are not in. That's just not in our vocabulary at the UFC. It's always a matter of, well, what can we do to figure out how to get through this obstacle and challenge? And ultimately we came up with what I think is going to be an incredible execution on Saturday night.
And of course, we're going to start a conversation with our panelists, and there'll be some time for you as well, our friends in the media, to ask some questions. Just remember, we cannot reveal a lot. I don't think we know a lot of what's coming up. You guys know, we don't know, and but I know that a little insight is going to help us all increase the excitement for Saturday. Just to finish with you, Craig, at what point do you decide it's time to assemble an all-star team for this to be a success? And how did you decide the names that you wanted to work with?
So the first group that we brought on board was Silent House Productions. They actually helped us with the lighting challenge and sorting through that, along with our friends at Sphere Las Vegas. And we once they were on board and we figured out the lighting solution, we then jumped into the creative piece. And that's when, I like to liken it to being, my role switching over to like a general manager of a sports team with a healthy budget to go spend on the best talent out there. That's where Carlos and his partner Valerie Bush come into play, and a lot of others that have contributed on this project. And really, to take on such an ambitious project and set a bar as high as we set it for ourselves, you needed to have an all-star team. So, yeah, I feel like we assembled a Pro Bowl team to go execute all of this amazing creative content. And then it continues all the way through the execution piece, which, a lot of the conversation today maybe isn't about that part, but that's where we are right now. There is a team at Sphere Las Vegas figuring out how this is all going to interface, and how the display plane is going to, create this incredible experience for everybody in the venue and at home.
Heidi, when we had Dana White on ESPN Deportes talking about this event, he insisted on a love letter to Mexico. Tell us about that creative process and just about the key artwork for these to be authentic.
So we started the creative process for the Noche UFC brand campaign key visual back in April, and it was really important to us that it be as authentic as possible, that it best represent the Mexican culture and really bring Dana's vision of a love letter to Mexico to life. Massive challenge, right? Any brand campaign, key art has to serve a very foundational purpose. It's a toolkit for assets across the promotion. It's integrated into broadcast. It serves many uses. And for that reason, and layered with the authentic storytelling that we knew we needed to deliver, we enlisted the amazingly talented Mexico-based illustrator, Luis Gaton, to create a key visual that really connected to the Mexican culture. His deep understanding of the Mexican fighting spirit and artistic traditions was just crucial in the development of the key visual. And it resulted in a really purposeful design, a kaleidoscope of iconic Mexican symbols and elements that are vibrant and just immersive storytelling. We have the Mexican Day of the Dead skulls, the eagle and the snake represented, as well as Aztec temples and Aztec gods. And that piece really has become the foundational storytelling for the creative campaign across many assets.
Fighters' kits will be unique for this event. Tell us about also that process and what was important for you and your team so you guys could be happy with the final product.
So the design process for the fight kit was also a very collaborative effort. We worked with Venom, our outfitting partner, as well as our internal consumer products team, and Jorge Gutierrez, who has been a creative consultant on this project since day one. Jorge Gutierrez is an award-winning animator, director, writer. He was co-writer and director of Book of Life. He brought a very authentic storytelling narrative to the fight kit, which, again, very important in all the storytelling we're doing across this event. you know, working with him and Venom, it was a fun process. There was a lot of iterations. It was important, and I think you'll hear this a lot during this panel, that it feel immersive and it bring another layer to the fan experience, not only for the fans, but also for the fighters. It represents a pride and of identity that we really wanted to bring to life.
Let me go to Chris now. You have the world's highest resolution LED as your canvas, and I can just imagine the size of the challenge and the things that you have to go through to get to the point in which you are satisfied with what you and your team are creating. But if you could just walk us through the early stages of these ideas and how the process evolved with time.
Whoa, yeah, that was a huge challenge, to say the least, literally. You're talking about a screen that not only is it just brilliant in terms of its resolution, but it's literally outside the field of vision of a human being. It wraps around the sides of your head and over your head. So that's in itself is a huge challenge, and it was clear that priority number one is you have to get the visuals right. I mean, our goal is to make this something that engages all the senses and works emotionally on every level, but getting the visuals right is just non-negotiable in a venue like that. And then for the film and the worlds, it was really kind of two different approaches. For the film, which will show in 6 parts, when the film is airing, when the film is being played, it is the show. It is the total focal point. And it's self-contained. The worlds are different. They are, at times, the focal point, and they are spectacular in their own right, but they are essentially environments in which they'll house other content, the traditional pay-per-view fight content, features, walkouts, the fights themselves. So while they are also spectacular, they serve a purpose, and they have to be dynamic and responsive to live cues. So with the film, we first had to decide how are we going to even capture a little bit of the vast history and really complex cultural identity of Mexico in less than 10 minutes, told in 6 parts, and you know, with 30 minutes potentially in between each of those parts. So you can kind of see this was quite a puzzle. And obviously do it in an authentic way, in a responsible way. And you know, each of the parts sort of has its own theme that also informs the design of the world. But then there are narrative threads and elements that are through threads through each part of the film, so that the parts feel like a whole, if that makes sense. And then with the worlds, we had to, you know, a little bit of the early development was a bit of a waiting game because we were led by what Carlos and our group put together in terms of the themes and the motif of each film. That was going to carry through to the worlds. So a little bit of a waiting game with the worlds, and then we started with development of that. What do we want the worlds to do in terms of responsiveness? How do we want them to look different during a walkout than during the fight, etc. So that's really only scratching the surface, and I feel like I've been talking a long time.
that might be enough. When you were learning about everything about the Sphere, because it's one thing to go to a U2 concert, experience it as a fan, but now you got to know a lot of what makes the Sphere so special. What did you learn during that process that really caught your eye?
That it was enjoyable to. And maybe this just makes me a different kind of a person, a little twisted or something, but it was enjoyable to get outside that 16 by 9 square, that rectangle that we've been working in, and reimagine what you've been doing for decades. And that has been really, really enjoyable. And because the screens and the audio system in Sphere Las Vegas are so incredible, there is nowhere to hide mistakes. So we had to make sure that we were meticulous and that we did everything the right way and to the highest level.
Carlos, you've had an amazing career directing, producing, but I'm sure when you heard about this project, this was maybe something that you hadn't envisioned yet for your career. So I want to know your experience once they came to you and told you about the project and what excited you about working with the UFC and the Sphere.
I mean, I think so many things about it are so innovative and unlike anything I have ever done. I think the draw for me and what excited me the most was the real earnest enthusiasm that I saw the team and that I saw Dana having for wanting to tell a Mexican story. And I don't know if Craig's told this often, but on our very first meeting he said, you know, straight from Dana, he was like, I want Mexican people who come and to see this event to leave feeling very proud, and I want non-Mexican people to leave feeling very jealous. And that was something that it was a cool challenge. I was just like, I want to tell a story about my culture and about my people and the largest screen in the world and try to find the most exciting ways of doing it. And it was a challenge, and I know how many people see these events, and it's just to know that they're dedicating an entire night, so many eyes just learning about my culture, like it made me emotional. So I think rather than like the technical challenge or even the creative challenge, I think just the idea of being able to tell a Mexican story at this scale was really exciting.
Talking to Dana, you can tell that he's very passionate about the passion of the Mexican fans, combat sports fans, boxing, MMA, and it was clear that this event is really special for him. But you are a storyteller, and he wants to tell a story as well. What's the story that you were most interested in telling this weekend?
I mean, I think that was one of the other aspects that to me was most exciting. When I first learned about the project, I was curious if they were looking for someone to make films about UFC, about UFC's history, about the sport, and everything is kind of stemming off of this idea of the Mexican fighting spirit. But these are not sports films. These are films, and they're about our history. And like at no point did anyone tell me, oh, you must make sure that you include the octagon in the films, or make sure that you put these fighters in. It was really just, we want to explore the story of Mexico and what's the most unique, vibrant, emotional way that we can do it. And that was really the directive. So I think it just tells you a lot about the event that we're going to see on Saturday. And the fact that it's a sporting event, but you're going to invite people in between the fights to sit and just watch a short film, a short chapter of a film, is unlike anything I have ever seen. And this dialogue between sports and entertainment and being able to bring my film sensibility into such a unique type of thing, it was just I just can't believe that we're going to do this.
The film is titled For Mexico for All Time, and told in 6 chapters between each pay-per-view bout of Saturday's event. You being Mexican, this being a Mexican-centered event, just tell me about the responsibility and the pride that you feel to be a part of this. You're wearing the very classic 1998, 1997, if I'm not mistaken,
98.
Mexican national team jersey? 98, yeah.
I mean, I think, Mexican stories, this is news to no one, but we've been underrepresented in film and misrepresented in film since the beginning of time. So I remember when I first talked to Chris and to Craig, I told them, I'm excited about this, but I want to make it cool, and I want to, of course, there's a Mexican iconography, and of course we're looking at traditions and things that are very true to our identity, but I also just want to think of new ways to tell Mexican stories. So there's all kinds of, the last chapter is about the future, and it's like a Mexican futurism film, and the fact that we are able to kind of really reimagine how we could tell some of these traditional stories. One of these is entirely hand-drawn, totally hand-drawn animation, and we're collaborating with artists all around the world. So the fact that we were able to push boundaries while also telling a story that is very much trying to dig into the heart of what it is to be a Mexican was just amazing for me.
Marina, the Octagon Girls will have a custom wardrobe, custom makeup for this event. I'm sure you've seen some of the film, if not all the film, all the chapters. Tell us about the inspiration and the idea with all your experience and all your background, what was special about this event? What you and your team want to portray this Saturday?
Like any creative process, there's always so many steps, and I think just from the very beginning, the conversations that Heidi and myself had, going through the film, going through the visuals, going through the conceptuals, and then from there, drawing inspiration and diving deep into the culture, diving deep into the resources. And, you know, there was a moment where at first, once, you know, we drafted many different versions of our creative boards and mood boards, I was like, okay, this is one of those things. I can go to showrooms, I can go to costume houses, I can find authentic pieces, I can really like touch and feel and bring something to life. And then there was a moment one night that my team and I sat down and we did so much research. We broke down every world, we broke down cultural elements, fabrics, textures, shapes, embroidery, tradition, architecture, that there was a moment that the next morning I was like, we're not doing that. We're gonna build this from the ground up. I would like to contact all the vendors, whether it's our local Mexican vendors in LA. I had my team drive all the way to San Diego and Tijuana to get me the right fabrics. We contacted vendors in Mexico so I can get proper handmade flowers, you know, all these elements that made this feel special, traditional, respectful, and also brought this essence and spirit into costuming like we've never seen before. So it took some time to get us into this unique place where I was able to blend tradition with the modern twist by controlling the design, being very careful of all my details, being authentic, being traditional, and again, just having that moment where I was able to incorporate so much of true Mexican artwork into our designs made it so special.
That Mexican artwork is very specific. The colors are very specific. The tones are very specific. That was clearly a challenge, but from everything you've done in your career, how special was this challenge for you?
You know, it's interesting. I think when you truly love what you do, and we really fell into this world of creating these unique visual stimulating gowns and costumes and elements that told just the story of Mexico, I think we didn't even have that many challenges. It was more so, how do we find the resources? How do we tell our story? How do we make the girls feel the spirit of their culture? How do we make the audience feel the exact same moment and just being inspired and also understanding the story through the visual of costume design? So for me, it was just being strategic and clever and puzzle piecing all these moments together that stay true to the culture and authentic and creative. And again, like you said, using all aspects from, you know, history to the revolution to architecture and, of course, even hand embroidery, which after studying exactly how the embroidery is done, we then finished all of our costumes by hand.
Now, Craig, what will the TV broadcast be like for this event? Clearly, unique venue, unique event. The TV broadcast is very distinctive in UFC. How will this one be different? And also considering how the fans will be able to experience the film as well.
So very early on, we established one of our guiding principles, which was to come up with a way to bring the images from inside Sphere to the viewer at home as if the viewer at home were seated somewhere in the 300 or 400 level seats. So that required us bringing in 2 additional TV trucks, a whole set of a separate camera complement for a separate director who's in one of those trucks. Glenn Weiss, you've probably heard his name thrown around in the weeks leading up to this. So we have a plan for that set of camera complement, to feed through what we're calling a screens truck to bring images to the viewer at home around the world, an experience and the volume of the Sphere as if you were inside of it. So there are times when the fights are taking place that you'll see a more traditional coverage from our production team, and then there are times when the film is running or even transitions into some of the worlds where we will be covering it from a different set of cameras to give you that full immersive experience as if you were seated inside the venue.
It's going to be truly special. Now, Heidi, 8 new Octagon girls for this event. 6 native born in Mexico, 2 of second generation. Tell us about this selection process, how it was, how it went down.
We went through extensive outreach to identify potential candidates, and the process included auditions and casting sessions with Mexican and Mexican American candidates. And it was really important to us that we identify individuals who were so culturally tied to our narrative, who could represent the films in a very authentic way. And so the process to narrow down the selection really was based on, stage presence and the personalities, but also they're tied to their backgrounds, their culture. And we went from 16, narrowed down to 8. It was a very, very hard process to narrow down because the stories were just so moving. These women are truly remarkable, and really excited to see them on Saturday night in Marina's costumes.
Well, and these costumes really help to tell the story, the whole story. How important is that part of the costumes, telling this story?
I've always referenced to costumes as the visual language. I think it's something that can create mood, feeling, emotions. It tells the narratives. It becomes something that is tangible for the viewers to see, and I think that we were able to capture each world just right, and that, like I said, it's authentic details, it's traditional cultural styles, and you'll really be able to feel the essence. And it was even happening in the fittings with the girls that I had yesterday and today, where them just putting on the costumes, I saw that spark, I saw that emotion, I saw that feeling, and I really hope that our audience gets to experience that as well.
This is a good time for our friends in the media to ask questions to any of our panelists. Yes? We'll take, there we go.
I'll start with Craig. I remember when they opened the UFC Apex, you gave us this tour, and we asked you, were there any things, Dana brought to the table that maybe you had to kind of scale back his expectations a bit or anything like that? Was there anything that maybe was, I know you said no is not in the vocabulary, but was there any things he wanted to do that was like, hey, maybe that's a little out of the realm of possibility?
No, I think this one was a bit more of a unique situation because Dana really set the direction from the very top. With this, and he couldn't have articulated it any better by saying, I want this to be a love letter to the Mexican people. That started the ball rolling, gave us the foundation. If we weren't doing this event inside Sphere Las Vegas for Noche UFC, we'd have to reimagine all of the creative. I mean, at least we had that strong foundation. So this love letter idea gave us enough. And then Carlos touched on it, but he said, I want Mexican people who are there to leave cheering, and anyone who's not, wishing they were Mexican. So that gave us enough of that kind of North Star to then build the pieces and the narrative. And then we just kind of kept him up to date. And I knew he wanted the bar to be wildly high, and every time we gave him these updates, I could see in his eye that we were going down the right path. And he had very few things to add that we weren't either already doing or couldn't easily accomplish within the foundation that we had created.
And then we spoke to him yesterday after the Contender Series, and he said some of the graphics are going to be moving subtly during the fights, changing throughout the course of the main card. So I guess, did you guys have that conversation of balance? Because this is a sporting event. You don't want to distract the fighters during the fight, but you also want to give fans this experience. So how did you kind of find that balance in the middle there?
So we've talked about this film being divided into 6 chapters, and after a chapter has run, we transition into what we're calling these world states. Within these worlds, there's different activity that Chris referenced within each world. And we felt that there were times when our show traditionally, our UFC show, is a little bit more entertainment, and I would say that's during fighter walkouts. So you'll see that reflected in the media plane behind the fighters. But when fights are going on, we're a fight promotion and a fight production company. We calm down the state to its most inactive. It's still active, but but the most calm state that we have of the 4 or 5 states within the worlds. And that's because the focus should be all about the athletes and their performance inside the octagon. So that is the way we approached it. We also built in enough flexibility into the way we engineered the worlds to dial that up and back during rehearsal, which, by the way, starts tomorrow morning. We haven't even gotten to that stage. So we'll do some fine tuning all the way up till really doors open on those little aspects, that little fine tuning. We'll see what lighting's looking like. So there's a long way to go here, but we feel like we've given ourselves that range, that flexibility to do what we want.
And question for Carlos, I actually do. Obviously, growing up in a Mexican household, when you watch like movies that take place in Mexico, everything's like sepia toned, everything's dusty. You know what I'm talking about. So, did you feel any, like you said, you liked the challenge of kind of telling the story? Did you feel any sort of responsibility to kind of show like how Mexico actually is and it's not, everything yellow tinted and dusty and the sun setting all the time?
Yeah, I mean, it was part of my initial pitch to Chris and Craig. It was just, I think there's so much nuance to what it means to be Mexican. There's so many layers that we could explore, and I just want to use these movies as an opportunity to explore as many of them as possible. So the approach from the beginning was like, we're not going to subscribe to like one look and try to show the super traditional side of Mexico that's beautiful and that many people have seen, but I'm also interested in like doing some experimental stuff. And what does it look like to tell a Mexican story, but all in 2D animation? And what does it look like to use like a little bit of AI? What does it look like to do like a futurist piece? And I think they were just very open to letting this become a creative statement and letting the creativity lead. We ended up bringing collaborators from all over the world, an animation studio in Mexico, a couple of animation studios in London, one in LA, one in New York, and we were all kind of different artists with very different visions, all trying to tell these stories. So the result you'll see, I mean, every chapter of this movie is so completely different from the others, and I really think that we succeeded in telling a story that is true to our traditions, but also just feels like innovative and unique and new. And to me, that was very exciting from the beginning.
What's the future of Mexico look like?
You'll see it on Saturday.
No spoilers.
Can you give us an idea of how difficult? I mean, we talk about enormous amount of planning, enormous amount of creativity here, but Saturday night, like how difficult is Saturday night to pull off or complex versus what you do every other Saturday night, which you guys have gotten down to a science. So can you give us an idea of, I guess, how much more complex or difficult or challenging Saturday will be?
Wildly more complex. I mean, we had a format meeting this morning at inside the venue with our broader production group. Those usually take about 30 minutes when we're doing it for a pay-per-view, and it was 4 hours and we weren't done. It's so Zach Candido, who's actually the one tasked with pulling all this together, who's still there, has taken all of these amazing assets that have been created and the film that Carlos has directed and been tasked with making it all work together. So, now it's time to make the whole broadcast sing and in harmony, and that can be wildly difficult when we've been so ambitious with pushing the envelope to create all of these interesting worlds coming out of these the different chapters of these beautiful films. So it's hard to articulate just how complicated it is, but it's trust me, the technical interface and the team that's on this, which is between those on the front end creating all the content and those that are here on site now that are going to execute, is about 500 people that have touched this project.
Craig, I don't know if you remember, but during one of our first visits to the Sphere, we were testing some of the footage. I don't remember what the technical issue was, but I remember the people from the Sphere meeting with all of us and saying, just so you understand the scale of how hyper difficult this is, there's 5 people in the world who could help us fix this problem. 4 of them are here in the sphere, and we cannot figure it out. So if that missing person does not come through, who knows what we're going to do. And I think that just gives you a sense of just how impossible some of these tech challenges were.
It's amazing. Small technical thing. You talked about the lighting. The last couple weeks here at the Apex, we've seen like lights around the side of the cage. Is that part of the lighting package for the Sphere?
John, very good. Yes, that is. I mean, we actually have been testing it for quite a while, and testing it inside here in Apex, which is a bit of our own little test lab. And we are putting that is one of a multitude of different lighting fixtures that we're putting into play on Saturday night. But yeah, you'll see that.
Nice. And last thing for me, I just want to ask, obviously this is such an enormous technical feat. Is there anything that you've taken already that you're like, we're going to use that moving forward in our normal routine, our normal broadcast on any aspect of the stuff?
Yeah, I would say, and it may not be built into every single one of our shows, but some of the specialty cameras that we're going to use on Saturday that we've never used before, I absolutely could see us using it in the right show going forward. That's outside of Sphere. So I would say cameras, and anytime, honestly, we needed to create something at the level that Carlos has with this film, I would absolutely go back to Carlos and Valerie and work with them again. So it may not be it may not just be a technical execution. It could be just the amazing collaborators that have been on this show from the get-go for months and months working their butt off. And I will say just quickly on that team, that broader creative team that has helped us get to this point. There are a lot of talented people out there, a lot of skilled people out there that are incredible artists when it comes to creating this kind of content. But to have the group that Carlos and Valerie assembled, and a company called Blink, who's been working with us literally around the clock for months now, the work ethic that they brought to the table that matched. I mean, honestly, we have a bit of arrogance around the UFC. You're probably not shocked to hear that about us, working at a crazy pace. Every department within the UFC, and a lot of you media members know because you're with us on the road. This team, was in lockstep with us. They were sprinting step for step all the way with us. And when I show up at 1 a.m, there's a team that's been there for hours before. Testing the content and, starting to get concerned about sleep hours here in these final few days. But it's been an unbelievable effort from the collective team.
Question for Carlos. When it came to just the history of Mexico and what you wanted to include, what did that process look like when you wanted to try to decide what time periods and things that you wanted to even include into these movies?
Yeah, it's obviously a very unfair process to try to distill the history of any culture or any country into 10 minutes, as Chris was mentioning. But what we did is just lay down the timeline and looked at the eras, the moments that most marked our identity, and then just it's a chronological story, so it starts with the first people who inhabited the land that eventually became Mexico, and then it ends in the future. And then we just tried to pick, the moments that we felt like best represented how that spirit from our ancestors kind of was passed down through the many, many different centuries. So, we did our best. Obviously, we had to leave a lot of stuff out there, but we, Chris, myself, and my writing partner, Anna Moskowitz, we worked together trying to put these scripts together and tell the most comprehensive story of this impossibly rich culture. So I'm pretty proud with what we did. Obviously, I wish that we could have had another 12 chapters, but I think it tells a whole story in a way that encapsulates what it means to be Mexican.
That's awesome. Heidi, you touched upon the logo and all the different aspects. How many versions did we see, or how many versions did we not see before you guys finally settled on what we see up here?
Surprisingly, unlike many other campaign efforts, we saw 2 versions. And the second version that you don't see up here is used in other assets. So both work cohesively together, which creates a wealth of assets for us to work with across multiple deliverables, which is, again, unique for a brand campaign that we typically execute. The artist, Luis, just nailed it right out of the gates.
Yeah, it's definitely fantastic. And last for me, Dana kind of, and I don't think it's been touched on today, Dana let out that there's going to be Easter eggs in this thing. Whose idea was that, and was that a fun process or a not fun process to include Easter eggs in this whole thing?
I mean, it's hard for us to remember who came up with what anymore, you know, because on this project. But I love the whole idea. It came in fairly early into the process. We worked with our own internal group, 3027, to implement it. And it's you know, it's a fun little you know, added element to you know, those both in attendance, and because of the way we're going to cover this from a in-venue perspective that I talked about with Glenn Weiss and his team, you should be able to pick up some of this stuff, you know, on broadcast as well.
Did you see Dana offered $25,000? It's the first person to find them all.
He did mention that to me. Yeah, yeah.
If legal approved it. If legal approved
Yeah, that's yeah. So I'm not sure how that's all going to work. I think they're sorting that out, but
How many people know where those eggs are? That's an important question.
Yeah, a handful.
We're not eligible.
I was say, would they like 12.5?
Everybody,
Yeah, we could split it 4 ways.
Question right here, front to your right. There's 6 chapters. There's 5 fights on the main card. Does that mean that there's going to be a chapter during the prelims, or how is this going to be mapped out? Because they're supposed to be in between the fights.
Yeah, it'll be at the beginning of the main card, so that world will be the home of a lot of the we call it B-roll packages of the features on the key fights, and the announce team stand-up will also be in that world. So that first world will not have a fight; will be a little bit shorter in duration, and then the first fight of the main card will be in the second world.
And my last question is, I'm curious about how the haptic seats are going to work, because usually when you have haptic seats for a movie, it's time for the movie, people have seen the movie, and you can buzz the seats. Striking and slams are very unpredictable. How is this going to work out in the Sphere?
Yeah, so that's been a big topic of conversation, because the haptics effects capability at Sphere is incredible. And it's very tempting to overuse it, which is possible. So we are going to use it dramatically at key moments throughout the night, but we want to strike a balance. When you think you should feel it, you will feel it, but we don't want to keep triggering it just because it's fun, and we can't. There is definitely a plan for those haptic effects to be responsive to the live fight, and that's where my instincts are telling me I should probably end that answer.
I mean, it's a wildly sophisticated technology. A lot of it built on audible cues within, you know, music tracks or even, you know, thump mics, and it's as Chris mentioned. Sometimes you got to dial it back. It's too sensitive. So we've been playing around with it all week.
Do you have any more questions? Yes.
Here,
Carlos.
question for Chris or Craig. How much of this experience of developing this unique event is going to help you to make a better or more exciting fight night experience for the fans for the future, for other like International Fight Week, other nights like what we had on UFC 300, like to make them unique and see there's stuff that you still can do that you were not exploring or not trying to do?
Well, it's a good question. You know, when you take such a massive leap building a show out like this, I know that, I mean, we're trying to get through the 14th here, you know, before we really start to think about what did we learn here that we can start to implement going forward. But I know in the back of our heads there are few things. It can be simple, even the way we program our in-venue screens in a traditional arena. I think we'll probably start to play around. You'll see it on Saturday night that we're taking a different approach to some of the ways we'll run features within those screens. I think that's something we might take to a traditional configured arena. And you know, it also, you know, when you've gone up so many levels in terms of an execution of a live event like this, I think we're just going to be kind of yearning to look for ways to just take our standard show, our pay-per-view show, or our fight nights, and start to tinker with it and look to level it up. So I don't know exactly where. I mean, I mentioned the screen execution, but there will definitely be ways that we can start to impact our other fight series.
And for Heidi, there's other markets that have their own crew of Octagon girls. This experiment on Saturday could mean like we're gonna have Octagon girls for the shows in Mexico or other shows like Noche every year.
Well, we do have some specific Octagon girls for other regions that we utilize for events. But I do think this does open up some additional conversations around how we bring in Octagon girls who represent different cultures. So excited to see where it takes us.
Thank you very much.
Another question over here.
So one quickly for me. I know this is kind of an open-ended one. Dana's made it clear that this is a one-and-done spectacle, but he also said never say never. And I know you guys want to take on this weekend first, but if the demand was there, is this a challenge you guys want to take on again next year or sometime again?
I would say if on September 15th we decide to do this again, we'll start on September 16th planning for it. That is one thing that we would jump into. Dana has said that, and he's also said you never know. I honestly don't think it's fair because this is so outside the box. We just don't know. I mean, I have a pretty good feeling on the way this is going to come off, but we really don't know how the general public's going to receive it. So I think after we take a breath and review what it was like and kind of get some feedback, then I think it's worth having the conversation. Will you ever do this again? But yeah, I would be very eager to get started if we were going to do this again in a year.
Over here in the back. Dana White did say this week he's looking to have this be something that could be nominated for Oscar, Grammy, all, you know, very grandiose plans. I mean, going into it, was that the goal from the get-go, that this broadcast could, you know, transcend a normal sports category and be eligible for all these kinds of things?
Yeah, he said it from the get-go. He threw Tony in there too, by the way, and we were trying to figure out how we could take Sphere and put it on Broadway, but we couldn't. That was one thing we had to tell him, it was impossible to do that. But he was, that was one of his very early goals, was to figure out how to be nominated for all those prestigious awards. And I don't know, I feel like we've done our best to try to achieve that, but some of those, you know, some of the requirements for those nominations they're tricky. So we'll see. I mean, right now, that's not the time to think about, you know, submissions for awards. We're trying to. I mean, that is getting way ahead of ourselves. We're trying to get ready to just execute on Saturday, and that's where our focus is.
To ask you a behind-the-scenes question, obviously you have quite the team. You have people with big event experience, Super Bowl, Oscars, the Eras Tour. When you have that many cooks in the kitchen, how do you even delegate and just let everyone do what they need to do?
That's a really good question. You know, we did. I will say that I feel like we got a bit lucky because we brought in a lot of people we've never worked with before. Carlos and Valerie. Baz Halpin with Silent House Production, the Blink team, and you know, Richard and Kristen and Tom. There are a lot of really talented groups that we brought in for the first time. We've never worked with them before, and we never ran into a situation where we had to, you know, manage personalities or egos ever. It was an incredibly rewarding collaborative experience. So, you know, I was very prepared to jump in and play referee if I had to, but I never once had to step in and get into a conversation with, you know, you need to back off a little bit or you need to step forward. It was, It was incredible. I mean, I can say that sitting here now, now that all of this amazing content has been created, that piece, that process was, could not have gone any smoother.
We have another question over there.
Yeah, I know the production probably started well before the card was put together for this thing, but was there any synergy or input from creative as you guys were putting together the card as to what kinds of fighters, what kinds of fights would work well with the production and the idea and vision?
The one request I put into Dana and the matchmakers was do not put more than 10 fights on this card. That was it, which is the only time I've ever given him any advice on a fight card. And I think on Saturday you'll realize why. There's just, when you start to get to 13, 14 fights, it gets really challenging to curate content for that volume. And you're at every 2 fights, you're adding another hour to the broadcast. So we felt 10 was the perfect balance. So if anybody's giving Dana a hard time because there's only 10 fights on there, that's because of me.
The live experience at the Sphere is so grandiose. How did you decide? I'm not sure who this is for to answer, but how did you decide how to tone it down? I don't know, without making the viewers feel like you were toning down the experience at home to what the people are getting live, what they would see on the screen.
Well, yeah, we talked throughout the entire process about balance and to never lose sight of the fact that this is a UFC pay-per-view. A lot of people are tuning in and even in the venue to watch fights, most. So it was really important that we not be distracting when the fights were the focus. And also, we don't want to distract the athletes. I mean, these are really meaningful fights in their careers. So that was always one of the North Stars in the design. When can we be really dynamic and exciting and flashy and loud, and when do we need to settle into an environment that is still moving but subtle? And that was always part of the intent.
Now the screen's so large, like for the storytelling that's being shown, how'd you decide what to show within that?
That was definitely a huge part of the consideration as we developed this, and I think one of the things that we understood is that it's okay if it's a bit overwhelming. Again, the screen is outside of the human field of vision, so we want it to be at times, at the right time, almost too much to take in a way that we hope will be fun and entertaining. But also there are some, one of the films that Carlos was talking about that is hand-drawn. I mean, it's very clear where your focus is supposed to be in that film. So we really changed pace. We really changed the approach to overwhelming you for a brief period of time, or at least giving you more than you could possibly process, and then at other times making it very clear what should be the focal point in a really really elegant way.
Carlos, you should mention just how you had to direct the live action shoot with Sphere Studios and VR goggles on and that whole bit.
I mean, the whole process of making these movies is completely unlike any other type of filmmaking, because what Chris was mentioning, you have the confines of a frame, and here you don't. So all of a sudden you have to worry about what someone would be seeing if they look up. You have to create like a ceiling to every single shot, and all of a sudden you have wings to every single shot. So the way that you plan, close-ups are strange. You can't have a close-up in film is you're focusing on someone's face, and here a close-up in the Sphere, no matter how close you are, you still have to consider the whole world around them. A camera move, we're used to handheld cameras where you're just kind of like bouncing around, and if you do that on the Sphere, people would just immediately get sick, because the most subtle move for a normal camera on the Sphere, it's it becomes your world. So it's like someone's just shaking. It's like earthquake vibes. So everything had to be. There was the first film that you'll see on Saturday. Our first pass of the film, it's a camera that's kind of floating through space in a pretty interesting way, and the first pass of it had a lot of motion. And Valerie, who's back there, was the first one to raise her hand and be like, I think we're gonna make everyone very, very sick if we leave it like this. So we saw it in the Sphere, and we had to pull back. And it's still very dynamic. Like, you really feel like you're flying, but you couldn't move you couldn't rotate the camera too much, and you couldn't have a lot of bumps. And if you start, the speed in the sphere is really exaggerated. So like a very small camera move, when you multiply it times a million, it feels like you're zooming through the space. So all of those things, it took a lot of. Craig was mentioning goggles. We couldn't go to the Sphere very often because it's a functioning venue, so we had to review everything in VR. So we would have these Zoom meetings where we were looking at stuff, and pretty silly, but you had everyone, all of us with goggles, just like looking around and like moving our hands around, and that's how we got to review everything. And then last month we started coming to the Sphere a lot, but other than that, we were just in our living rooms trying to anticipate how this was going to feel at such scale.
Let me ask you a follow-up on that. Do you think this is the first ever live sporting event at a stage like this? Do you guys feel like other sports would be able to pull something off like this?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that we're going to do on Saturday night that will set maybe a new expectation or foundation for live sporting events inside such a unique venue. But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of talented people out there. There's a lot of incredible, talented people at leagues, at networks, that I'm sure can reimagine their own sport inside such a unique venue. So I think we'll give them a little bit of a nice head start, but I think there's a way to do it.
Have you heard from other leagues, owners, teams?
I talked to the head of production for NHL leading up to the NHL draft. That wasn't a sporting event, but it was a live broadcast out of there, and I thought they did a great job. But it was more of a conversation about resolution and graphics and those types of things, but it wasn't a sporting event. So I have not heard from, I haven't heard from any league or network
NBA.
saying, yeah, no, I haven't.
I also was just going to say that the philosophy of really embracing storytelling and really embracing film in a sporting event, to me, is very innovative in a way that I hope is embraced more often, because I feel like often sports and like my world don't really get to speak to each other. And I really think the fact that you're asking audience to like really sit and enjoy a movie in the middle of a sporting event, and it's not like a concert where you just have stuff playing in the background and people either listen to it or not, or distract. Like, this is a proper, we're dimming the lights and people are going to be immersed into storytelling for a couple of minutes, and that never happened. So I'm excited to see like what this leads to, and like I would love for other sporting events to start bringing in directors to start making movies. Like, that to me is like really, really exciting.
Do we have any more questions from our friends in the media? If not, then just one quick thing. I know we are keeping everything, I was going to say a lot, but yeah, mostly everything was going to happen inside the sphere on the wraps, rightfully so. But what about the exosphere? What's the plan for the other massive screen at the sphere?
So we could spend another 15, 20 minutes just talking about the exosphere, which is equally incredible. We will use it, and we'll use it in a significant way on Saturday night. It's a dynamic, wildly technically capable media plane as well, and it can take live feeds into it. It can take really incredible animations. You've probably seen some of our key art that Heidi helped create already, animated on the exosphere. You'll see more of that, but we will definitely be taking live shots of it with some drones, and we'll also be populating it with new content that no one's seen yet. We haven't even seen it yet.
Okay, I'd like to wrap this up by asking each of you, what do you hope fans take away when they leave the event on Saturday? Starting with you, Marina.
For me, I think it's finding that balance, almost piggybacking on what Carlos said. Like, our worlds don't often integrate with sports, and it's such a beautiful collaboration and synergy that we're about to create, where I'm about to tell visual stories about culture and tradition and feelings and moods through my line of work, which also complements what the brand of UFC is. So I think to me, it's creating that synergy for the audience to really see how art and sports can really go hand in hand.
Carlos?
I mean, I would love for people to walk away with a new curiosity and appreciation towards my culture. I feel like many times Mexico and Mexicans are reduced to very two-dimensional ideas. And I think especially in this country, I'd love for people who don't know a lot about my country to be intrigued and to be excited to learn more about it. And for people who come from my culture to really feel like they're seeing parts of themselves that maybe they haven't seen on a stage of this size, of this scale.
I think a respect for the innovative approach we're taking to the storytelling in the sphere and bringing the Mexican spirit to life on this amazing plane, as well as lasting memories of an amazing event that's really pushing the boundaries of live sports.
Yeah, I would like people that are fortunate enough to be in venue and those watching on television, including those who have been to a lot of sporting events and a lot of shows and entertainment presentations, to just feel like that was something different than they've ever experienced before in their lives, because it really, I think that's what we're going to deliver.
I would say a deeper appreciation for the Mexican culture, their heritage, as well as our athletes in our sport. And it's been said multiple times on the panel, but this blending of sports and entertainment at this level really gives us a unique opportunity to tell this secondary narrative about the Mexican people and their rich culture and heritage, and also showcase our athletes at the same time. Pretty unique opportunity. So if we can strike those to, strike that balance and get people to take away that deeper understanding of the Mexican people, as well as just an appreciation of our sport and athletes at a different level, I would feel like we achieved our goal.
Well, Mexican Independence Weekend has always been special in Vegas, but it's about to become an even more important date, even more special, with an event that I don't know if in your minds in the business ever envisioned would be possible. And I know you've been extremely busy these days, so thank you so much for taking time and sharing a little bit with everybody on what's coming up this Saturday. Truly a historic event. So thank you, guys. Let's give it up for our panelists. It's been a great event, and I'm sure the fans will appreciate knowing a little bit more on what's coming up for UFC 306 Riyadh Noche UFC at the Sphere. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you guys for being here. A lot of events still coming up for the rest of the week. We'll see you soon.